Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack one of the most significant and complex governmental structures in the world today. What we're doing here is a purely objective, structural breakdown of how state power is organized in the People's Republic of China, looking directly at its constitutional texts. Now, we aren't analyzing politics or policy outcomes today. Instead, we're looking at the architectural blueprint itself. We'll examine the rules, the institutions, and the flow of authority exactly as they're laid out in the supreme law of the land. So if you've ever wondered how such a massive administrative apparatus is actually structured on paper, well, you're absolutely in the right place.
Here is our architectural roadmap for today. We're going to start with the constitutional foundation, define the core features, and then examine the supreme legislative organ, the National People's Congress. Finally, we'll look at the President and State Council before comparing these institutions side by side.
Let's move to Section 1 and see how this built, the constitutional foundation, tracing the supreme law of the land.
To understand the structure today, we just need a quick look at how it evolved. Starting with the establishment of the Republic in 1949, the foundational documents went through several iterations, specifically in 1954, 1975, and 1978. But the vital examination point for our purposes, the document that defines the modern state, is the 1982 Constitution. Adopted in December of 1982, this document replaced its predecessors and firmly established China as a socialist state under the leadership of the Communist Party of China. It was designed with a heavy emphasis on socialist modernization, institutional stability, and rule-based governance. And, it's been amended a few times since just to adapt to changing times.
Which brings us to a fundamental question. In a nation of this massive scale, according to this 1982 constitutional blueprint, where does the state's ultimate power actually lie? Really, it's a question of where the buck stops in terms of legal and structural authority. The answer is explicitly codified in two key articles. Article 2 states that all power belongs to the people. But how is that power operationalized? Well, that's answered by Article 57, which designates the National People's Congress as the highest organ of state power. And this text brilliantly illustrates the constitutional theory of power distribution here. The ideological authority originates with the people, sure, but the institutional authority is entirely vested in the National People's Congress. This concept acts as the load-bearing pillar for the entire structural design of the Chinese state.
Section 2. Core features and articles. The defining characteristics of the state.
Now, what's really interesting about this operational philosophy is a concept called democratic centralism. Outlined in Article 3, this is an absolutely crucial piece of political jargon to grasp. It's the principle that aims to combine democratic participation, meaning input, discussion, and elections at various levels, with centralized leadership and unified decision-making once a consensus or policy is reached. In this framework, lower bodies are strictly subordinate to higher bodies. This ensures that once a decision is finalized at the top, it's executed uniformly across the entire system.
Beyond democratic centralism, the Constitution outlines several other really salient features. China operates under a written socialist constitution within a unitary state model. This means power isn't divided federally like it is in the US, but rather it's highly centralized nationally. It also establishes fundamental rights and duties, and adheres to a socialist rule of law. But a crucial takeaway to highlight here is the unicameral legislature. Unlike systems with a House and a Senate, or a Commons and a Lords, China's highest legislative power is concentrated entirely in a single, unified chamber.
Moving on to Section 3, the National People's Congress, the supreme organ of state power.
Consider this number for a second, 3,000. To be exact, it's nearly 3,000 deputies. This is the sheer scale of the National People's Congress, or NPC. It is a massive legislative body. These deputies are elected to serve 5-year terms. And when they convene, it is literally the largest parliamentary body in the world, representing various provinces, autonomous regions, municipalities, and even the armed forces.
But how exactly do those 3,000 deputies get there? Well, they're elected indirectly through a ladder-like process. It begins at the local levels with electoral units, then those local units elect representatives to the provincial-level People's Congresses. Finally, Step 3, those provincial-level Congresses elect the specific deputies who will actually sit in the National People's Congress. It's a tiered, indirect election system explicitly designed to filter representation all the way up from the grassroots to the national stage.
Once seated, the NPC holds tremendous constitutional authority. According to Articles 58 and 62, the NPC exercises the absolute legislative power of the state. The powers held here are vast.
They enact primary laws, they hold the sole power to amend the Constitution, and they elect major state officials, including the president. They also approve national economic plans and state budgets, basically acting as the ultimate supervisor for all other major state organs. On paper, there is absolutely no higher institutional authority.
However, let's be real, a body of nearly 3,000 people just cannot efficiently manage daily legislative operations year-round. That's where the Standing Committee comes in. While the full NPC meets in an annual session, the Standing Committee, which is a much smaller, dedicated group of deputies, functions continuously when the full Congress is not in session. Under Article 67, the Standing Committee interprets the Constitution and laws, enacts specific legislation within its authority, and oversees the daily work of state institutions. It essentially acts as the engine, ensuring the continuous, uninterrupted operation of state oversight.
All right, Section 4. President and State Council, the executives running daily operations. First up, we look at the head of state. Outlined in Articles 79 and 80, the President of the People's Republic of China is elected directly by the National People's Congress for a 5-year term. These specific examination points dictate that the presidency is an office born entirely out of the NPC's authority, anchoring the executive squarely to the decisions made by the supreme legislative organ.
When looking at the specific duties, a pretty clear picture emerges. The president promulgates laws, appoints or removes certain state officials based on the decisions of the NPC, receives foreign diplomats, and performs state ceremonial functions. The president also issues orders, but does so strictly in accordance with the decisions of the NPC and its standing committee. So structurally speaking, the office of the president is designed to serve crucial constitutional, diplomatic, and ceremonial functions. They're acting as the domestic and international face of the state's decisions. But who handles the actual heavy lifting of daily national administration? That brings us to the State Council. The State Council is the highest executive organ of state power and acts as the central people's government. It's headed by the Premier. If you're comparing this to other systems you might know, you can think of the State Council as the functional equivalent of a central cabinet or the primary administrative bureaucracy of the country. It's a distinct, operational arm separate from the ceremonial duties of the president.
So alongside the Premier, the Council is packed with vice premiers, state councilors, ministers, the Auditor General, and the Secretary General. But the crucial takeaway is this. While the NPC holds the power to make the laws, the State Council is strictly responsible for implementing them. They formulate administrative regulations, prepare the national budget that the NPC later approves, direct the various ministries, and manage the day-to-day economic, social, and foreign affairs of the nation, all under strict constitutional provision.
Section 5. Comparing the institutions. Locking in the structural hierarchy.
Let's lock in this balance of power so it's crystal clear. Think of it as 3 distinct pillars. First, the National People's Congress. This is the supreme legislature and the highest organ of state power. Everything flows from here. Second, the president, the head of state, holding vital constitutional, diplomatic, and ceremonial responsibilities. And third, the State Council, the highest executive and administrative authority, basically the engine that executes the laws and manages national administration. Keeping these 3 distinct buckets clear in your mind really prevents any confusion about who does what in the Chinese state structure.
Which leaves us with a final provocative thought. We've seen exactly how this massive architectural blueprint is laid out on paper, from its 1982 foundations to the unified power of the NPC and down through its executives. But in a system fundamentally built on democratic centralism and strict institutional stability, how will these defined constitutional dynamics adapt to rapidly evolving future global challenges? It's a massive question to consider as you keep exploring how these texts transition from ink on a page to real-world governance. Thank you for joining me for this explainer, and keep learning.